everyone. Welcome back to Bump and Tell. We're your hosts, Allie
and Emily. And today we have a special guest, our first guest, Claire. Welcome to Bump and Tell. You're our honorary first guest.
Yes, so
Not
happy
to put the
have
pressure
you.
on you. So for anyone listening, Claire and I have a good mutual friend, Melissa, from I guess my Midwest days. Claire and I don't think, Claire, you and I have never actually met in person.
I don't think so. I feel like I've met you, but I don't think we've actually met in person yet.
Correct. Same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
No, yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
Claire and I, Chelsea, Melissa, and Allie, other Allie. But yeah, no, we've never actually met in person, but so just to kind of give a little bit of background on why we are having Claire on. So Claire is how many months pregnant?
26 weeks this week.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, congrats.
Thank you.
And Claire's pregnancy journey is not linear. She actually did IVF, correct?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we just kind of want Claire to share her story. As some of our listeners know, Allie's had 2 miscarriages. So, her path has also not been linear. I've only been pregnant once, so I don't have any experience in anything else except for one pregnancy. So Claire, just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your journey, and we can just kind of roll from there.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me on. This is so fun. So like you said, I'm a little over halfway through a pregnancy now. It was quite a journey to get here. So I'll just tell you a little bit about that journey and how it went and how it's going. So my husband and I got married back in the spring of 23, and we knew we wanted a family, right away. I think a lot of people kind of the typical journey, to get married, have kids.
Yeah.
And just from talking to, friends and what you see on the internet, like I always thought, okay, it might take a little bit of time, but like, we'll be patient. I've always had really normal cycles and whatnot. So I kind of assumed everything would be okay, but you never know until you try. Right.
Right.
And so pretty much got married and started trying right away. I randomly had about like 3 months into trying. Well, not randomly. I mean, everyone goes to an annual appointment, but I had my annual gyno and it was about 3 months into trying. And so I mentioned it because those are things you do at those type of appointments. And she's like, okay, at 6 months of trying, if you're still not pregnant, I would recommend you get fertility testing done. And I remember thinking, that seems really interesting because I've always heard a year that you should wait like that amount of time before intervening with anything else. And so I just kind of clocked that in the back of my head and was like, okay, like it's only been 3 months. I'm not too worried yet, but like, we'll see. 6 months comes and goes, still not pregnant. And I was like, why not reach out to, a fertility clinic, get some testing done. It was pretty much all covered by insurance. Like it really wasn't a super difficult process to do the really basic testing. So for anyone that's listening, get the testing done because it's not that hard and you can find out so much about your body and your husband's body and it's great. But it does take some time. So by the time we got all the testing done and got results, it was we're at like month 8 at this point. And so by this point, I'm kind of like, this is weird. Like all my other friends who are in the same time as me, are either pregnant, having their child. Like it kind of feels like the world's just like moving without me. And it that part was hard because as every month passes, you're like, this is weird. Like something's going on.
Right.
So we got the results back. Everything was normal, average on my end. It was actually on my husband's side, which we were shocked. It did not expect that. And pretty much his numbers were just really low. So his quality it was just a sperm test for those that I'm not exactly sure how it works. It's just like a sample test that they take. And his count was just really, really low. And so we met with this doctor and they said, Claire, your stuff looks good, normal, in normal ranges for your age, your health. But due to Sean's numbers, Sean, my husband, you have a less than 1% chance of conceiving naturally.
Oh my gosh.
That was really hard to hear. But I will say I was almost relieved because it was finally someone being like, you're not crazy. There's something going on, and that's why it's not happening, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, and
so
Allie and I talk about a lot that it's like you were taught not to get pregnant
yes,
for how many years of our lives, and then once
Yeah.
it's time for you to start, you don't even think that you're going to be
Right.
in the less than 1% chance to be
No.
able to conceive.
Yeah, such a
Right.
paradigm shift. But yeah, I would imagine that having some sort of an answer at that point like feels better than if it was like we don't we don't know
Absolutely.
at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. And not that I was like wishing something wrong, but it was so nice to at least have a plan at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
And Emily, you brought up the, trying for so long not to get pregnant. I mean, I had been on birth control for 15 years, I think, at this point. Like,
Okay.
that's all I knew, and then you jump into this new point in your life and you're just like, why isn't it happening? Like, this is what's supposed to happen.
I feel like they drill it in our heads that like if you look at a guy
You'll
when
get
you're
pregnant.
ovulating, you're gonna get pregnant.
Or like if you have, they teach you in health class, if you have sex, you will get pregnant. Like, don't do it. Or something.
It is
In high
crazy
school.
how hard it is to get pregnant. And it's totally shifted my mindset on it because everybody always thought, you could just get pregnant so easily. Like, you're always trying to prevent. And I know accidents still happen all the time. Those people are, I guess, really fertile, but it's really hard to get pregnant. I mean, anyone who's ever tried knows there's like 2 days of the month or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, depending on every individual cycle, it's crazy. But yeah, so we were given that information and we sat on it for a few months. I remember we kind of knew we were ultimately going to do IVF. That's what they kind of talked us through. Some people start with, if you've heard of Clomid, it's like medicated cycles. IUI is kind of like the less invasive version of IVF.
Okay.
But our doctor was like, I wouldn't even recommend it because the numbers are so low. You would be wasting money by doing something like that. You might as well just go straight to IVF. And I knew 1% about IVF. Like, I knew what it kind of was, but I had no idea. So I'm a person that loves to control a situation, jump in, know everything about it. And so we took probably like 3 to 4 months until we actually got started on our first cycle. And some of that is like insurance and finances and figuring all of that out. But a lot of it was also just like mentally preparing for this new thing that we're going to embark on and do. And then, so we did 2 cycles. Our clinic called it sister cycles. I don't know if that's like a known term everywhere, but pretty much 2 egg retrievals back to back to get to the embryo count that we wanted. So you do the medications, you have your egg retrieval. They get the eggs from you, and then they put the sperm into that to create the embryo. So we have the embryos now created, and then ready to be used. And so it took us 2 cycles of that. And then we got really lucky and only had to do 1 transfer, which I'm still just so happy and grateful about, because they say typically the stats are up to 3 embryos per 1 live birth, just because it's not 100% confirmed.
Oh, okay.
Which is really interesting and that was really hard to explain to a lot of friends and family too, because people got so excited to the end that knew we were getting close to transfer. And I was so scared. I mean, the whole process is scary, but like, you get to that point and you're like, okay, I'm almost there. But they tell you, 60 to 65% chance of it working. And you're like,
you're going through all of these, all the emotions you just don't know if it's going to take or not.
Yeah. So that was really crazy. We decided to keep it private with just Sean and I, and we took it. It's like I'll say 2 week. It's like 10 days technically, but to when the transfer happens to when you know if it worked or not. and we didn't tell anybody. So that was crazy because everyone around us was checking in. How are you doing? How are you doing? And I always had my spiel. Like, I'm sure so many people heard this from me, is like, there's been some delays, but everything's fine. And actually I'm like waiting to see if I'm pregnant or not.
Yeah.
But then we found out it worked, and like, knock on wood, everything's been pretty good. And we're over halfway now with this little miracle baby.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I know you kind of alluded to it a little bit. So when you found out that you were suggested to go through the IVF route, you and your husband, did you speak to like friends and family about that initially, or were you more of like, let's kind of sit on this for a while, just us, and kind of go through this process with just the two of us? Because I imagine obviously very like emotional.
For sure. We did tell close friends and family.
Okay.
There was people in my life who were also trying or had also just recently gotten pregnant, and we were almost kind of like on this journey together.
Okay.
And so it helped me to talk about it. I always felt like, really up until the transfer, I was so comfortable talking about it with friends and family. Like, it almost was like therapy to me to talk about it.
Okay.
So we were pretty open. And then honestly, what helped the most is there was a couple people in my life who I knew had been through IVF, and I used them as resources.
Okay.
And that was so helpful, because you can Google, you can talk to doctors, but you're going to get, the clinical response. And I just wanted like the real and raw from a friend.
Someone you trust and know.
Yes. Yeah. And that was amazing, because that's how you really know what you're getting yourself into,
Oh, 100%. And I feel like that's one of the like the guiding lights of why we wanted to like start this podcast and have people on. Like, you sharing your story is just, I feel like so many things happen, and there are points where you could relate whatever the fertility journey may be. But a lot of times it's like, I don't even know who I could turn to for this. So hearing all the different perspectives and stories, I feel like is amazing.
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, like Allie said, she went through her first miscarriage and kind of felt those same feelings.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know who to talk to. Like, you can talk to your family, but if they haven't been through it, it's a different, I mean, I haven't been through what Allie's been through, but it's just a nice outlet to just be like, okay, there's so many women that are going through what you're going through, what Allie's been through, and so many other women that go through various things with pregnancy. So
yeah. And then a question I wanted to ask earlier, for like the actual fertility clinic and testing clinics, I know you said that a lot of the testing was covered by insurance, but how were you and your husband able to find, I guess, like the place that fit you best to go to, like, for the testing? And then was it the same kind of facility or clinic for like the transfers and all of that?
Google, honestly, was how I
Okay.
found it. We had recently at the time moved out to the suburbs of Chicago. And so I was no longer in the city. And so I felt like I didn't want to go to the city where we're at. It just didn't make sense to drive into the city every time I needed to go. And so we found a clinic that had a location pretty close to us, and they're pretty well known just from what I could tell from reading reviews and all of that. They're also like regional throughout the country, so that made me feel better. And I kind of feel like it's one of those things, like, you could always do more research, and would there have been a better one? Maybe, but it worked for us. And we always felt like the clinical part of it was great. Like, we loved the doctors. We felt like they always knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And the insurance piece is hard, because it all depends on everyone's insurance, and fertility things are so nuanced. Sometimes it's really covered, sometimes it's not. I have friends who have gotten full egg retrievals covered completely, and then I have some people who have zero fertility coverage and they pay everything out of pocket. We were really lucky that we had a pretty good insurance for fertility. Like, it was literally set aside for fertility, which is just so cool.
Yeah, awesome.
And so there's still so much that does go out of pocket. So it does suck that it still cost us so much money, even with this amazing insurance benefit that we had. So I feel so much for those people that go completely out of pocket. I truly don't know how people do that. The loans, and they have to. But
I couldn't imagine the costs associated with
and even
that.
there's like the emotions you're going through already, finding out you can't conceive naturally, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna make this decision to go through IVF, to then be like, we don't know if it's going to transfer, and then on top of that, like
the
paying
financial
for it.
burden.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God,
like you said, if your insurance isn't great, then like you might be paying 100% out of pocket. So like you're just just adding to all of the
it's crazy. Yeah. There's so much to it, because there's obviously this physical side to it, right? I mean, it's the needles and the blood, and just all of that. It sucks. But the mental load is 10 times worse, in my opinion. And this is coming from somebody who, I hate needles. I hate blood. Like, I've always been like pass out at the sight of blood. It's terrible. So this has taught me a lot, but the like mental load of just the financials and the waiting games and everything is so much worse, in my opinion. It's so hard. And yeah, I feel so much for people that don't have any insurance coverage, because for a lot of people, it just makes it not even possible, which is so sad.
Yeah, not even an option. I feel like women are just like warriors. Like, listening to you tell your story, like, I don't know if you work a full-time job, but if you work, I'm sure you were going to work during this whole time, and it's like you have no idea that, like, your coworkers have no idea probably that you're going through all of this, and you're just like, yeah, I'm here at this meeting talking about
showing
whatever.
up, yeah.
When there's like, I'm doing something very serious, like,
right.
outside of here.
It's crazy. I actually, so I travel a little bit for work as well. I have kind of a job where I'm either home in my home office, or I'm in the field with the accounts that I cover. And I remember being in meetings with people and just kind of going about my day to day while I'm like shooting up in the car, like with the, PPM injection that needed to happen. Like, it's crazy.
So how was that for you? Someone being normally scared of needles and being like squeamish around blood and all of that. Were you just kind of like, I just mentally, this is what I have to do. Like, I'm just going to power through it. And then just after the first couple times, or was your husband like, I'll inject you?
It was a good mixture of both. So that was something I was so scared from the beginning, because like truly I would freak out over a flu shot, I don't do needles ever since I was young. And the first cycle we did, my husband did pretty much every shot. So I arranged for me to make sure I was home it's about 2 weeks typically of medications before your egg retrieval.
Oh, okay.
And you usually do, I think everyone's like a little bit different depending on your protocol, but you do some in the morning and then some at night. So you can go about your day typically, but he did most of them for me. So I would just not look. He would do it. We would ice it, and it was okay. For my second cycle, I had a friend who had went through all of this recommend do the shots yourself, because you're someone who likes control. It's better that way. And could not agree more. The second cycle, I did my husband was right there, my support system the whole time, like cheering me on, but it actually did help me to do it myself. So there's like some weird mental thing with that, I guess, that it helped for me to do it. And I think you also get to a point where it just becomes normal and you get so used to it. I mean, I remember the 2 weeks before your egg retrieval is hard, because there's so many medications and they're very time specific. So you really have to plan your life for those 2 weeks kind of around the cycle. So you may do 3 to 5 in the morning and 3 to 5 at night. And it's like, you need to do it, within a 30-minute window of a specific time. So it's pretty timed out. And so you do kind of have to plan around that. But then there's other injections that come throughout the process where It's kind of like a free for all a little bit, like do it within this 2-hour window. And I remember I'd be like at dinner with friends and I would just take my purse, go to the bathroom and do it at the bathroom. There was at one point I remember I was at a comedy show and set up on the floor of the bathroom all my injections. Because there's some stuff like you're a scientist, like you have to like make up your injections. It got really interesting. And then what always shocked me was how long the injections go for. So you do, you know, the big medications right for your egg retrieval, but then they don't really stop. And that's what I didn't think I expected. So they kind of always keep you on something throughout this process when they're prepping you for a transfer, because that's the ultimate goal is to
you probably, I mean, like I probably did, you do them and then you think you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So before the transfer, they start you on, 1 week before is this big shot called progesterone and oil. And that actually runs through 10 weeks of pregnancy. Okay. So you get pregnant and then it's like, well, still got to inject. Okay. And so I think I counted at the end and I had done like 70 of these progesterone and oil shots. And this needle is like this long. It's a thick needle. It goes in your muscle, in your like hip area. It's nasty. But by the time I got to that point, I was back to traveling. So I would literally set up like a little station in my hotel room, would do it myself. Like you figure it out. One of you said earlier on, like women are just superheroes, which I kind of feel like sometimes you just don't even realize what you're capable of until you're forced to do it. And I'm sure that I will experience this later in pregnancy and in motherhood and everything, but you just do it. Like you just figure it out.
100%. I was going to ask you if you took, after you were technically pregnant, if you had to keep taking progesterone, because after my second miscarriage, my doctor's office said like this is used in the IVF world. Yeah. And so I took it was vaginally. I think the options were I could like go into the office and they would shoot it like in my butt muscle, or I could just insert it like you would oh my gosh, what's the stuff for a yeast infection?
Monostat. A suppository.
Yeah, a suppository. So yeah, I did that for the first 12 weeks that I was pregnant, but I couldn't imagine doing that as that shot for 10 weeks.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I've not ever really found a complete answer to why IVF patients have to do it that way. Because I have heard other people who have had any type of fertility issues. So whether it be a miscarriage or, you know, some type of loss at some point, or a high risk pregnancy, even I've heard where you do, you know, an oral or vaginal progesterone. But for all IVF patients that anyone I've ever come across on the internet or friends, it's always been a shot. So they call it progesterone and oil. And how it was explained to me was we're essentially kind of faking a pregnancy cycle. You know, your body's not naturally going through that and releasing those hormones that it needs to. So when you first get pregnant, progesterone naturally
ramps up
higher. Yeah. And in my body, it wasn't doing that because my body wasn't naturally going through that. So it was, you know, you're kind of faking this cycle. But it always shocked me that it's through 10 weeks. It seemed so long, but I will tell you, when I did that last injection at 10 weeks, it was the best day of my life.
You're like, yes. So are there any, now that you said 26 weeks, right? Are there any additional shots that you've had to keep doing or like start at some point in the pregnancy?
The 10 weeks
It was just the 10 weeks.
Okay.
So they told me that I'm not considered high risk. You know, if anything happens later on, just like any pregnancy, you know, that they're always like, you could become if, you know, blood pressure and different things like that. But at this point, I'm pretty much treated like a normal pregnancy. The only difference that I had was, so everyone knows like an anatomy scan, you know, 20 weeks, you get the full scan and everything. At 24 weeks, they brought us back and it was essentially anatomy scan round 2, but they call it a fetal heart echo, I think.
Okay.
And it's a deep dive ultrasound on the baby's heart. So, I mean, it lasted probably an hour, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
just looking at the heart and all the chambers and everything. And we joked about it because it was kind of a boring ultrasound. Like, you don't know what you're looking at. We never saw like
Yeah.
the face or anything. But there's some percent, I think it's a very low percentage, but there's some percentage of heart defects with IVF patients.
Oh,
So
I did not
I
know
didn't
that. Yeah.
so that was really the only thing so far. I've heard sometimes they induce at 39 weeks, but I also
Okay.
think that happens with a lot of other pregnancies too. Like, that's
Yeah.
not out of the norm these days,
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, my appointments are pretty much treated as normal, which is really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I actually think we have another friend out here who went through IVF too, and I remember, I think she was due in August, and I remember her husband being like, oh yeah, like we're actually going to go in on this date because they're thinking of inducing, and it honestly was probably around 38-ish weeks. So that, I mean, seems to be a thing in the IVF
Yeah.
world, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't know
but
that.
I didn't know if it was just like her pregnancy, maybe she was considered high risk, or I don't know, but maybe that's
It must be due to something. I haven't really gotten to that point with my doctor yet on whether or not that's going to happen. And they're, I think all doctors these days are like, anything can happen at that point, like
Yeah.
they're monitoring you so closely towards the end. So it's been really nice because you go to this specialty clinic, and it's like, it's very scary, you feel so high risk, and it's so specific and everything, and then you just kind of get transferred over to the regular OB, and it's weird at first because you're like, I'm not used to just being treated as normal.
Like,
It's
yeah.
really nice in the end.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a normal pregnancy at this point. So
Were you able
that's
to
so
go to
nice.
your OB, or did you have to go to a
good question.
specific OB?
yeah, just regular OB. Yeah, everything was normal.
That's good.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
know,
awesome.
like, for me, like, my OB, I love my OB. And I don't know what I would do if, I mean, like you said, you figure it out, you get through it. But, like, if you have an OB that you like, and then they're like, oh, well, because you did IVF, you have to go to this specific OB. Like, I don't know. I just feel like you'd be like, okay, that's fine. But, like, kind of
It'd be hard.
bummed. Yeah.
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 Also, that's
Yeah.
like, I feel like such an intimate relationship, especially like if you do have like difficulties and there's like more nuances to your story. I feel like I remember my OB when we found out like the first time that we went in at like 12 weeks, and they're like there's no more heartbeat, and it's like, oh, like so devastating to hear that. And she just like wrapped me up and like hugged me. We were both I was crying, and she was also kind of tearing up because I've been going to her for like 7 or 8 years. Yeah. So I feel like that relationship is like so special. So yeah, that's nice that
when you develop so much trust in them.
Oh my gosh.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's great though. That at least like everything feels normal now, and you've had an easy pregnancy, hopefully.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
I feel like everybody warned me about the first trimester, and I truly didn't know it would be that bad. But by bad, I just mean it was like everyone else. You just feel like crap for 2 months.
You're tired. You're maybe a little nauseous.
Yeah. But it was so funny because I had a lot of friends say, you got to get to this week and then you'll be better. And I did not believe them. I was like, there's no way I'm just going to wake up and feel better. Like I felt hungover for weeks.
Yeah.
And I woke up it was one day before I was 14 weeks. I remember it so clearly. And I remembered yelling to Sean, my husband, and saying, I want to go to Target. I want to work out. I want to do stuff. And from there, I'm good. Like everything's been good since then.
All the energy was back. You're just like, I woke up, I'm good to go.
Yes.
That's awesome.
That's so, yeah. I mean, that's pretty on brand. And then, Allie, I don't even know if we mentioned this. Allie's 30.
Oh yeah. 30. I'll be 35 weeks this Friday, which is crazy to think.
So exciting.
That's why I'm wearing my husband's Heroes Lacrosse shirt, because it's the only thing in the closet that fits over my belly at this point. But
it's so funny.
So you can attest now that you're back into the like I'm tired. I don't want to do anything phase.
Yeah, because you're super close to the third, or are you third trimester?
Close to third.
Close to third.
Like a couple weeks out. And so this is totally first time pregnancy comment. And I will sure look back at this and laugh at myself. I like can't wait to get bigger. Like I have a bum.
Oh no, that's sweet.
And I can feel myself like slowing down a little bit, but I feel really good for the most part. And I just want to be bigger. Like I want to go out in public and for it to be so obvious. And it's still dependent on what I'm wearing, And I know I'm going to regret saying that because there will get to a point.
No, that's sweet. I think someone, especially like you and your husband, have been through so much that you're like, no, I want it to be like every day. This is a walking billboard. Yeah. I am pregnant. Look.
Yeah. And one day you will truly wake up and you're going to be like, where did this belly go? Like, I feel like Archie's almost 11 months old. And I feel like looking at pictures, I was like,
how was I?
When did I get that big? Like, and like you're like sitting there and you're just like, I don't feel like I look big. And I looked at a photo of myself where I think he came 3 days later, and I was like, oh my God, I was huge. But like I felt big, but I didn't like feel like I looked big. And then you're like, when did that happen? Like
until you look back and you're like, wow, that actually happened. I have looked back at some photos of me pre-pregnancy, and I will say I'm like, okay, yeah, there's definitely a difference. Like things are changing. But it's so funny because I don't know if you guys felt this way, but in my mind, like from movies and just pregnancy in general, what you see on the internet, like I always thought you get pregnant and you just like our belly. Like you have a belly and you walk around, and especially for your first pregnancy, so many people go so long before they're like fully showing.
Yeah.
Like it's cold here in Chicago. Everyone's in like sweats and sweaters and jackets. And unless I'm in tight clothes, it's not that noticeable, And I'm like, I'm almost in my third trimester. And I feel like I'm showing more than even some of my other friends who were way smaller than me. So it's just so funny how you think of pregnancy so different until you're in it and you're like, oh, I'm like almost there. And I'm finally now showing and getting a bump.
Yeah, I know. I've always thought about that. Like, obviously we don't live in like a cold weather climate. So being like, if you don't really want to share with people, like, oh, I'm not pregnant
just yet, wear oversized
keep putting the layers on and keep putting huge sweatshirts on. Were you and your husband, I know you were communicating with some people like throughout the process, but once you kind of found out like, oh, this is like viable, this is good, like everything's checking out, did you guys wait a little bit to like make an announcement? Did you make an announcement? What was the timeline with that?
Yeah, we told family first. So I would say family knew, because once you find out, you're so early when you find out IVF. And I know natural pregnancies can find out really early too, but usually I would say average is 4 weeks, like natural pregnancy is when you typically
once
test.
You like miss a period, I guess.
Yes, right. And with IVF, you find out at like 2.5, 3 weeks, somewhere in there. Like it's really early. So the way it works is you do your transfer, you get a blood test done 10 days after the transfer. And typically at that time, if it has either worked or not worked. So they test your HCG level, and that's how they know, and then they do a series of blood tests to make sure it's typically doubling or tripling and doing what it needs to do, showing that it's a viable pregnancy. And so we told family and a few close friends right away. Like I would say after maybe a couple of the blood tests. But most of the people in my life, I waited until we got the heartbeat, which I feel like is pretty normal. I think a lot of people wait till then. We were being monitored so closely, so I felt really good about it, but just so much can happen. Coming from having a miscarriage, it's a really scary time. And so I just didn't want to share too much. And so we held it in for a while, and we kind of did grew the circle.
Yeah.
But, it was a slow process in getting the information out, but we did share with family pretty much right away, just because they were our support systems through all of this.
They were
But then I
probably
did
so excited for you guys. Oh my gosh.
yes. I mean, because they had seen from the beginning, you know, the process of everything. And then, I mean, we did the typical share it, 12, 13 weeks or whatever it is when you're out of your first trimester with like the world.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it felt really normal. It felt
good.
It was just a normal pregnancy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, you guys are so lucky I feel like from what you've shared with us, it's obviously not been easy on you, but going through all of the things that you've gone through and then only having to do the one transfer, like, I'm sure you're just relieved that you don't have to do as many freaking shots, but also that like you don't have to wait anymore. You know, I mean, now you do because you're pregnant, but that's a good thing. You're waiting for the best outcome.
Yeah. It's been such a journey, and sometimes I just am like, this is surreal. Like, I didn't believe it for the longest time. Like, it was like, this isn't actually happening. Like, it's not, you know, because you talk about it for so long. I mean, before we even got married, we'd talk about having a family. And we're coming up on, this year will be 2 years married, and he should be coming shortly after that. Like, he could fall on our anniversary.
And you're having a boy?
Yeah, a boy.
Oh, yeah. Congrats. I heard the he. So
yes, little boy. What are you having?
Also a little boy.
A boy. Okay. I feel like everyone's having boys right now. It's like the season of boys.
Everyone I know that's pregnant is having a boy. I don't know.
Allie also has a 2-year-old boy.
Okay.
Yes. So, just more boys. I love it. Boys, they're so fun. They're so fun.
We're so excited. I grew up with one sister, and I grew up very girly household. Like we would, when I first got pregnant, found out it was a boy, my mom and sister I'm very close to, we would joke like, how are you going to raise a boy? Like, I don't know anything about boys. And it's just so funny how you just like, it just becomes you. Like, I'm so excited to be a boy mom.
A boy mom. Yeah.
It's so fun.
I love it.
They're the sweetest.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The best. It's the best. I'm so happy for you and your husband.
Thank you.
Does he have siblings as well?
He has one sister. So he grew up with both. And, you know, everyone has always asked, like, what did you want? You know, I feel like this process is like, you will be grateful for whatever you get, you know?
Like a healthy baby.
And speaking from like someone who hasn't gone through IVF, that it's such a weird question when you get pregnant. Everyone's like, what do you feel? Do you feel like it's a boy? Do you feel like it's a girl? And we're like, we just really want a healthy baby. Like, we don't care what it is. So I think Allie and I, we talk about it a lot, where you're just like, we just want them to be healthy. And like, can we stop? Like, I mean, yes, of course, like, would you secretly love a little girl? Probably. But you're like, also like having a little like mama's boy will probably be so great.
Yeah. And I think I think we did a whole episode on like just our opinions and be like, of what not to say. But I think just going back to us, like, you don't know what someone's going through for that woman to get to that point to where it's like, oh yes, I am very much pregnant. Like, that's maybe not the best question to be asking. Like, what do you want it to be? It's like, you don't know what she's been through to get there.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know if you had people that did know what you were going through and still ask you, you know.
Well, there's that too.
And you're just kind of like, read the room. Like, we just want to help. We just want this to transfer. We just want a healthy baby, a good pregnancy. Like, we're fine with whatever.
Yes. You'd be surprised how many people ask that question. I mean, I'm sure you guys got it too, but like, I get it often. I was just at a work conference recently where I was around a lot of people, and so was kind of like announcing to people that I work with and whatnot, and got it so much. Like, I would say, like, I'm very open that we're having a boy, and it was like, oh, what did you want? And it's like, a baby?
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, just a baby. But that at the end of the day,
just wanted a baby. Yeah.
But 100%.
Yeah. What's interesting is when Allie and I did our episode on like what not to say, or like keep your opinions to yourself. So Allie and I were actually pregnant with your second baby.
Oh yeah, my second pregnancy.
Like we were like 2 weeks apart from when I had Archie and when she was due. And me being my first pregnancy, I'm like texting Allie, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, do you just have constant anxiety your first trimester because you can't feel a move? It's weeks and weeks upon weeks before you get another heartbeat and ultrasound and all that. I'm like texting her. And obviously, lo and behold, she had found out she miscarried. And I was like, I am the worst friend ever. I was like, I'm so hormonal. I'm like crying to John. I'm like, I'm terrible. And Allie, of course, is like, you didn't know.
Yeah, you couldn't have known that.
Just kind of like, you know, I think in that moment I was like, okay, I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth again and just like not say anything to anyone ever. You know, obviously it's different. Like we're friends.
Yeah.
And someone else probably wouldn't have taken it, you know, to heart either. But like, it's just things like that. Like, you don't know what people are going through because, again, like you're not going to announce to the world, hey, FYI, like I had a miscarriage or I'm going through IVF in case you wanted to know. Like, so you don't say something stupid.
So hard. There were so many times in the summer that, because I had stopped drinking during all of this before being pregnant.
Right. Yeah.
Just as kind of like a cleanse for myself. I thought maybe it'll help with everything.
Yeah.
And I had someone, I remember this very clearly, who had said, are you pregnant? And I was actively going through IVF. And I was just kind of brushed it off. It's like kind of a stranger. I had just met her that night. We were at a social gathering. And I was like, no, you know, and kind of like pretended like, you know, it's also like weird to ask someone that you just met that question.
Just because you weren't drinking?
Right. And I said no. And she winks at me. She's like, you probably are. You're just not announcing yet. And I wanted so badly in that moment to be like, I'm actually going through IVF. I just injected myself before we got here, but thanks, you know, like, but it's so really hard. It's such a vulnerable thing. And like, it's like, you guys, I'm sure feel so lucky to have each other and be able to go through that together. Like I have a couple girlfriends who very similar timelines. I have friends who are also going through IVF. And so in those moments, I can remember texting and saying certain things and saying, don't feel like you have to give me any information, but I just want you to know I'm thinking about you and I'm checking in on you. And that's what I always found really nice is like, it's not always questioning what's going on. It's just letting them know that you're thinking about them and you're there for them. And that could be for IVF. That could be for a regular pregnancy, for a typical just first trimester blues that you're going through. But just that support is so nice. Like you don't always have to question things. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's amazing advice, like all around, like you're saying at any point of the journey, even postpartum.
Yes.
Just like, hey, thinking of you, not expecting like text back or anything like that. Just want you to know like I'm here and you're on my mind. Yeah, I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah, because like I mean, you met someone that night and they're like
that's wild,
crying into your life and you're just like I want to tell you, but like then you're probably also like it's not your business because I just met you. But it's just like we say it, I feel like almost every episode, just like be mindful of what people are going through. And maybe you didn't even want to get pregnant and you were just like I just don't drink. Like that's also not your information to know.
I do have a question just because I'm not familiar with the IVF space because I've never gone through it. But you're talking about injecting yourself. Is there anything that the husband, like, does the husband ever have to get shots for anything or like for preparation? Never. Okay.
Always got signs in the tone.
I was just wondering because you were saying like the testing results show that it was actually like on the sperm side. So I wasn't sure if there was something that they have to do or if there's like lifestyle changes that they suggest. I remember reading after.
I think I've read that too.
Yeah. Like before conceiving this, what is that? My fourth pregnancy now. Before conceiving this one, it was something talking about like men also limiting alcohol and like caffeine consumption just for how it can I guess impact sperm and stuff
it absolutely can. There's a lot of lifestyle changes that our fertility doctor would talk to us about. There's nothing medication wise, you know, I mean they're pretty much your support system. Like the only thing truly that they do is the day of the egg retrieval is they give a sample for the embryo to be created, which sounds a lot more fun than shooting up for 2 weeks and
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Nonetheless, like all the weeks prior to
Yeah.
that you've been
right.
preparing
But
for this.
there's really, no like medications or anything like that, but the lifestyle changes are totally a thing. So Sean did stop drinking leading up to the sample, because they said it could help with quality, with his numbers. It wasn't like they were like, your sample is going to completely change, but it can help with the quality. So I want to say, and don't completely quote me on this, but it's 2 weeks to a month or so where prior to the sample is the sperm being made. So things that you're doing up to a month before influence that sample. So like healthy eating, no drinking. He's not a huge caffeine drinker anyway, so that wasn't like a big thing, but I'm sure that affects it. But like smoking was a big one. So Sean's not a smoker, but that was something that they were like, absolutely cut out if you are a smoker. And that would be like cigarettes, marijuana, all of it.
Right.
Obviously like drugs and things are bad, but alcohol was a big one. So he kind of with me did that. And we had a nice little, sober summer. But it can help. So it's so weird because you do the egg retrieval, he does the sample, they make the embryo, you wait a period of time to kind of see if it works. And there's so many factors that go into the quality of the embryo you make. So it could be from me, it could be from him. Like there's no real way to pinpoint exactly what makes a good embryo. And so they just kind of say in general, live a healthy lifestyle because it can only help,
Right. It would only serve you well to do that. Okay.
I don't think you said this, Claire, but okay, so from start to finish, when you started the injections to when you did the transfer, and then I guess the 10 weeks beyond, like how many weeks in total were you going through?
So we started our first cycle at the end of May.
Okay.
And then we did our transfer in August.
Okay.
And in between that, there was 2 cycles done and they were kind of back to back. So we did one retrieval in June and one in July. Okay. And then we did our transfer in August. It's interesting because they kind of control your cycle. So I didn't really get a period all summer because they're controlling it. It's really crazy how it all works.
Yeah.
But it still goes off of your cycle. So you have to wait a certain amount of time in between each of these procedures and different things that happen. And so, and a lot of it too is just the waiting around for like results, and there's genetic testing and there's different things that you're waiting on. But we did our transfer in August. And then I remember the last shot was beginning of October. So it goes for a while.
Yeah. I was going to say
months.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5-ish, like some change, I guess, just depending. And of course that's also depending if
it works,
like, so
right?
did they prep you that if for whatever reason your transfer didn't work, like do you take a break and then you start, or can you just like, let's keep it going?
They do prep you for all that, which is nice. I liked how, I mean, there's totally an emotional side to this, and the doctors are good about that, but they're also very matter of fact. Like, okay, so if this doesn't, if this isn't viable, this is the next step.
And you want to hear because you've already been through so much. You're like, I don't need to sugarcoat it.
Yeah,
exactly. And so it would have had to have been about another month because of the cycle and how everything works. So how it would have worked is if the embryo did not take, I would have gotten a period. So it would have just been like a typical, pregnancy that didn't work.
Gotcha.
And then I just never got my period and it worked. But you would have had to have a full cycle. And so it would have been about a month later. So what's hard is people that have failed cycles or failed transfers is it can just go month, it really quickly adds up. And that's where people get in trouble. And then you also think like, what's going on in your personal life? Do you have trips? Do you have things going on that you can't, do certain things? Because like after the transfer, I couldn't get on a plane. I couldn't lift anything above, I want to say it was like 20 pounds. you can't work out. You're essentially on pelvic rest for a period of time. Okay. So there's all these different things that they tell you to do. And so I was like, well, I want to be home. And, you're like, you want so badly for it to work. There's nothing you can do. Just like be healthy, live your normal life and just see if it works. That week was the craziest week because you do this monumental thing. You see the embryo, get inserted and then you just wait. And we waited.
You can't do anything.
You
like
can't do
physically
anything.
or mentally, like you're just kind of
I feel like that would be so hard.
You're like going crazy. I'm sure.
Yes. And so some people start testing like just at home pregnancy tests right away, but it will say negative until your HCG level is to a certain point. So just like with a natural pregnancy, if you test too early, I think I was listening to one of your episodes where you had a negative test and then it's just like that. So we waited 7 days, so a full week post transfer. And then we did do an at-home test, which was so exciting because it was the first ever positive test I had ever seen in my life. And so we went into the blood test like with very high hopes because we had gotten a positive test at home. But that like 2-week time period post-transfer is probably, it's the hardest, but it's also the most exciting because you're like, you made it in a way, like you're there. But I feel like that's, with any pregnancy, like you get pregnant and then you wait, like another month or 2 before you can even go to the doctor. Like the waiting games that we all experience with this entire process is just crazy.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes the days are just crawling by.
And what's crazy is like just to think of women that, don't get that first transfer and then have their period and then they're just like, you know what, let's go for it. Let's just keep going. You're essentially going through IVF for a whole year plus. Like if you just want to keep going, which I feel like if I was in that position, I'd be like, you know what, let's just keep going because like you said, like if you stop, it would be harder to pick back up. I mean, if you have trips, then sure. But still, like it's just crazy to think about and just like such a different perspective.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I felt all summer because when we did our first egg retrieval, and I don't want to say it failed because we did get some embryos from it, but it wasn't great numbers. And our doctor was really pushing, like, you should do a sister cycle. There's good results with doing it back to back. And I just remember being like, if we can make this work, let's do it because I'm used to it. I'm in the dumps already. Like, I don't want to say dumps, you're fine, but you're already there and you're in it. And I just wanted to push through and do it. And I'm so grateful that we did 2 cycles because hopefully now I'll never have to do another egg retrieval again. We have enough embryos.
I was going to say, are the embryos kind of like the other ones that you were able to retrieve but didn't have to use yet? Are they just kind of like parked for when you want to use them, I guess?
Yeah.
They're just like waiting.
Literally, just on ice, ready to be used whenever we want to use them. So we'll have to go through, I'm sure there's like testing and things that you do kind of leading up to it. And unfortunately, the progesterone and oil will come back, which that will be a sad day when I have to do that shot again. But besides that, it's just a transfer at that point. So there's no more egg retrieval, which is nice because the egg retrievals involve like anesthesia and it's just a little bit more invasive. Yes. Where transfer, honestly, the transfer itself was magical. Like that day was so great. We were so excited. We had gotten to that point. It's completely painless. You do so much that's painful during all of this. And I mean, you go in, it's the worst part of it. You have to have a full bladder. I mean, it's like
they tell you pregnant. It's like every time you get an ultrasound, they're like, and you're like, and you're going to push on my pelvis.
You're going to push on me. But it's like full bladder. We literally watched on a screen. I can now say him be inserted in. And then they're just like, okay, you're done. It was like 15 minutes.
That's so cool.
That was really similar to like, I'm like trying to like envision like what you went through. Like, was it like a pap smear kind of esque situation?
Yes. I would say transfer
less painful,
but like even less. Like, because I would say a pap smear is not that painful, at least for me. Like, it's more just like uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just like
But I wouldn't say there's like pain with it. But you have a full bladder, and then I believe they use a catheter, but it's not painful, and then they insert like turkey baster style, literally, into your uterus.
Okay, that's what I was imagining was like a turkey baster, but I didn't know if that was accurate or not.
Yeah, no,
or appropriate. Yeah,
like you see the needle on the screen, like go in, and the doctor's like walking us through. I didn't feel anything. He's like, okay, I'm in, and you can see the embryo like come out, and then it just like. That's cool. And I remember the nurse sitting next to me, and I hadn't worked with her before because they were like the transfer staff or whatever.
Okay.
And you're just laying there, and then they're like, okay, you're all done. And she's like, don't worry, it's not going to come out. She's like, so many people ask that. Like when you stand up, you're like, what's going to happen? And the way she explained it was, it's like a piece of rice or a grain of sand in a tub of peanut butter. Like it won't move. She's like, just go about your normal day. Like everything, and they tell you to like, the no lifting, and you're not supposed to exercise, and there's certain things that they just want you to be more careful on, but like for the most part, you just live your normal life, and then you see if it works. It's so crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. That's so funny. I need to watch it. That's so cool.
I feel like I would also like get up and like immediately like clamp my legs together and just like waddle to the car.
Yeah.
It has to be a common thing, because she looked at me right after and said that, and I was like, okay, I'm really glad you actually said that, because it's a weird thing to think,
Yeah. Yeah.
But, oh my gosh. It was great. This was so helpful. I had like I said, I've had friends that have gone through IVF, but I've never had the opportunity to talk to them about it. So thank you for sharing.
Oh my gosh,
your story, all of the steps that you took, but your husband was there with you. This is very insightful.
Yeah, thank you so much for being so open and like honest about your experience, because I'm sure we put this out there and it's gonna hopefully resonate and help someone out there. So we really, really appreciate you coming on and talking through everything that you've been through. And we're so excited for you and your husband and your sweet little boy coming soon.
When's your actual due date?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to ask.
May 4th.
May 4th. Okay.
Yes.
I was trying to do the math in my head, but I was like,
I was too.
Yeah, I know. It's too hard, but thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about it. I was so excited to share it, and hope it resonated with somebody, and I've had so many people now since sharing it on social media reach out to me, and I'm like an open book. I'm like, I want to help, because I know the people in my life who helped me so much when they would tell me about their experience. And even if it's like, hey, what's this shot going to feel like? Or what's this appointment like? Like, it just helps to know, and it helps to take away the stigma around infertility, which I hate that word, because it just sounds like you can't get pregnant, but it's this world of fertility. And I've loved sharing, because it opens up these, like you guys having a podcast to talk about stuff like this. And I'm sure someone will listen to this, and hopefully it will help them, because there's so much to it, but it's really exciting to talk about. I love to share.
Like we said, that's why we started this, because Allie went through her miscarriages and just postpartum, and she was the first one out of our friend group out here to have a baby, so she was kind of like beside herself for a while. I mean, not beside herself, but like when you're postpartum, like nobody understands what you're going through,
unless I feel like you've been through it.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. And then I had Archie, and we just talked about the crap that we go through, like pregnancy, postpartum, like all the things. And like postpartum, I think, was very eye-opening for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like, I understand. So we just wanted to, like you said, like hopefully what we're doing helps other people. And then having, people that have gone through your experience too. And like for you to share your story, it's like, hopefully it lands into the right lap of someone to be like, okay, this is what I needed to hear.
I really think it is.
You have such a positive outlook on it too. I mean, like you said, you felt like you were in the dumps, rightfully so, because you tried for so long, and then now you're almost there.
I know, you're so close. Oh my gosh, so excited for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, this is probably going to be a stupid question, but what are you most looking forward to about being a mom?
Oh gosh. What am I most looking forward to? So what's funny is I have not always been like a super maternal person. Like I knew I always wanted kids. That was never a question. But if you asked me like 5 years ago when my husband and I first met, I was not dying for a baby at all. Like it was like, I can't wait to have kids and have a family someday with you. Like, that's so exciting. But it wasn't like, I wasn't the person that's like, baby. Like, if I was around your baby 5 years ago, I probably wasn't interested. Like, that just,
I get that.
there's certain people that are just like not baby people. And then I hit a point where I'm like baby obsessed and couldn't wait to have one. And honestly, it's like the little things that I can't wait for. I can't wait to see my husband become a dad, and for us to, we're going to have like a summer maternity leave, which I'm so excited about, especially in Chicago right now. It's so cold. And so he's going to be born, and hopefully it'll be starting to get warm. We'll have nice weather to be, outside, go on walks, just like living normal life. Like, I feel like everybody talks about like the really big things, like you're gonna see the first step, or you're gonna the first time he says mom, or all the things. But like, just the day in and day out things of my husband playing with him and watching that, and just all the little things. I think that's what I'm most excited for.
Allie said something to me that kind of ties in with what you just said. I think there's been many moments where you're just like in the trenches of being a new mom, and you're just like, how does this ever get better? You're just whatever, all the things. But she said something that is so freaking true. It's the days are long, but the years are short. So I think that ties into just like you said, you just want to enjoy all of the little moments in between. And I think that's like one thing, like I'm kind of like you, like I would need to be in control of everything. Like during my pregnancy, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want pictures of this. Like I was such a little brat, to be honest. But now like, I'm like savoring every second of every day. And like you said, like, like crawling, walking, like those are huge milestones, but I'm like, I don't really care. Like I care about them, but I don't care about them. We're just like, okay, I want to enjoy this day, this moment right now.
Yeah. It's like once you're in it, and like the magic of just like the day to day, like you're saying, like seeing your husband play with him, or like simply just going on a walk. It's like you feel like you're living this dream that you've like now wanted for so long, and then you're finally in it, and you're just like, oh my gosh, how is this like, how is this real? How is this real?
Exactly.
But I like that you asked that question. That was really sweet.
And on a high note.
Yeah. Now before everyone starts crying.
I know, right? It's like that's where I get emotional, because I think about in 4, 5, 6 months, like our lives are going to look so different. But I can't wait for the little moments. Like, just
and every month you will literally be like, this is my favorite month. This is my, like, that's like, I'm going through that right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just like want to freeze time right now. Archie is like such a little ham right now. Like he's just interacting so much more. And I'm like, I love this stage. But I'm sure when he's 2, like Allie's son, Bruce, like, yeah, they're crazy, but you're also like, you just find so much joy in every stage of life.
It's the best. It's the best.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for coming on and telling us your story. We really, really, really appreciate it. And we will definitely be checking in, especially when May 4th.
Yes.
It's closer.
Yes. Talking with you guys, and I love what you're doing. It's so cool to talk about all these different topics with pregnancy, and the good and the bad and the ugly that all comes along with it. But it's really cool. So thank you.
No, thank you for sharing your story. But keep us posted. We can't wait to see pictures of the little guy.
Thanks, Claire. We'll talk to you soon.